Yes. I remember the one. The one we originally took off.
All right, it's 7:00. Welcome to the board meeting. Can we stand for the pledge? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
So we're going to start with the approval of the minutes. I'm sorry. Motion to approve the minutes. Danielle, Jenna, all in favor? Motion carries. So we'll go to the update from the superintendent.
Yes, I have a couple things tonight. One of them is a presentation on our long-range financial plan, which is very prudent as we are coming to a close on this budget season. And as far as Stephanie and I are concerned, we start planning the minute that budget goes through for next year. And as we've mentioned multiple times, it's going to be a very tight year next year. I know we say that all the time, but the reality is, as you can see through this budgetary process, the state aid isn't increasing, the foundation aid isn't increasing, and that is one of our main revenue drivers. And with tax cap limitations, we have a finite amount of income and only increasing expenses. So we just have to make sure that we balance that. But before we do that, we have a new employee that has joined us tonight from Cambridge. Jody, would you mind introducing Lacey?
Not at all. Good evening, everyone. This is Lacey Jura. She comes to us with over 12 years of experience as a speech and language therapist from Cambridge Elementary School. Primarily, your years are at the elementary level. You'd like to share. You're not that far, so
Yeah.
I think we're a much nicer drive for Lacey.
Yeah.
She was at the right place at the right time. I don't know if you recall the postings that we've had all year. It's been a challenge, and right at the last minute, I don't know what was calling to us, but we were like, one more try, and Lacey was our last applicant.
Yeah, worked out well. Perfect timing. Looking for something a little closer to home. I live in Cohoes and from Cohoes, so Brunswick kind of smaller field that I'm used to from Cambridge, but definitely much closer drive. So I'm excited to join.
Welcome.
We're very excited to have you, and I introduced you first because we are going to have a long presentation. I don't want you to feel compelled that you have to stay. But I do want to thank you for applying for the post. I know teacher world, we don't always apply mid-year for things.
Right.
I know that's a little challenging. Cambridge is holding her to 30 days, so as soon as she's available, she's going to start with us. There will be some compensatory services for the kids that miss out for the time where we're not covered, but that's okay. We'll make all that up. And we'll
Yeah,
be
and it's
compliant.
happening, intense students, so we'll have plenty of time for those in that session.
Welcome
All
aboard,
right,
Lacey.
thank you so much.
Next, if you'll all turn your attention to the big screen, I'd like to introduce Jason Swartz. Jason has spoken to the board many times, and Jason works more closely with Stephanie than myself, but he works for Bernie Donegan. Bernie Donegan is our consultant that works on big, long-term planning, costs of things. Stephanie would do a much better job at things. But just in terms of like, how much money can we use, how much can things cost? And his ask was, hey, given our current financial situation and the budget that we put forward to the voters, if we play this out, can you anticipate what our fund balance would look like, making some assumptions about certain costs? And with that, I will turn it over to Jason, and he can answer any of your questions. You do have the presentation, copies of it, and I don't know if they'll screen share or not, but you have it ready. If anybody in the audience needs to move up so you can see, please feel free. Okay, Jason.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. As Angelina said, we do have some hard copies. Therefore, I will pull up my screen and kind of go through the presentation that way. But I just not knowing how big the screen you got there, how it'll show up in bigger hard copies will be good as well. So so you can follow along. So let me pull that up now. Make sure that's working.
It's a fake background. That's a fake background, isn't it, Jason?
Yeah, it's a fake background.
Wow, that's a really well styled office.
I'm at home right now. You don't need to see my bedroom. All right, let's see if that's gonna work.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, perfect. So, as Angelina said, my name is Jason Schwartz. I'm the president of Donegan Incorporated. We're the district's financial advisor. So, oftentimes we're helping Angelina and Stephanie, in terms of capital project management. So, as you're all aware, you have the vote coming up. So, helping quantify what the cost of that's going to be, long-term plans for the best time to bring projects on, things like that. But one of the other things we do and just started doing for the district recently is also long-range planning. So kind of looking at, your fund balances and what the trends are and, what the picture looks like for the next 5 years or so. So we did that for the first time last year around January. So we're, a little bit over a year later now. We've come back with another update. So we'll run through that tonight and certainly can answer any questions. And just off the top, wanted to thank Angelina and Stephanie because, we obviously put a lot of work into this report, but so did they in terms of helping, gather the information, really kind of, craft some of the assumptions to what you're experiencing there locally. So thank you for their input as well. So jumping in just as a quick refresher for anybody who wasn't on the board last year and hasn't seen this presentation before about what a long range plan is. So really what we're trying to do is, make projections. We're focusing primarily just on our general fund for these purposes and making projections on what we think our revenues and expenditures and fund balance use is going to look like. It is different than a budget. It can guide your budgeting discussions, but we're not saying the numbers you're going to see in this report tonight are what you should be budgeting for the next 5 years. We're trying to take, realistic looks at what could happen with a little conservatism in it, but your budget for any number of reasons will likely look a little different than this because you have to build in, contingency for the unknown during the year. You can't go back to the voters mid-year for changes to increase the budget. So, often your budget might have a little bit more room for the unknown, then we're trying to strip that out a little bit when we look at these projections. And really the purpose of that is it helps us kind of assess any trends in our revenues and expenditures, and then discuss, cost benefit or risk and affordability of any new services that we're looking to bring on. We'll talk tonight about the capital improvement project that's on the ballot this May. And long range plans are especially helpful right now for districts because you're coming off all the COVID stimulus money that all the districts have been working through, and that's been very helpful over the last couple of years, but it's also something we have to monitor, if we're maintaining positions that we didn't previously have and that funding source is going away, what does that look like in terms of the long-term picture? And the final point is the long-range plans are not, static documents. We should be, regularly updating them because things can change, quite quickly. For instance, just on Monday, as we were wrapping this up, we had to quickly change the state aid projections because the budget finally came out. So, things change very quickly in school district finance. So it's good to, update this ideally, once a year, but if not every year, then, at least, every year or two. So you're staying on top of any, updates to the trends or assumptions and adjusting accordingly for your decisions. So moving forward, before we get into, really the meat of the long range plan itself, we wanted to just do a quick capital update because, that is a big part of your budget, one of the three, component parts of your budget. And that's a piece that we do actively help manage a lot with the district. So what you're seeing on the screen here is just a quick update for you on the prior capital project, which is pretty much wrapped up at this point. Since last January, when we last presented, we've issued the bond for that project, and we've also closed out the final cost report. So we've really moved forward with that. And one thing just to call your attention to on here, if you look in that box on the top, a little bit more than halfway over, you see it says state average interest rate and DASNY average interest rate. When we issued that bond back in June of 15 and 23, we went through DASNY, or the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. And the reason we did that is you see that average interest rate went up from 2.1 to 3.5. That's what we get aided on. So we got a lot more aid by going through the dorm. So while that's a little more costly to do, it was certainly a huge benefit to the district. I think when we ran the analysis, it was about $1 million in local share savings from issuing through the dorm instead of public market. So that was a great financial planning and management tool that the district did to make sure that last project turned out well, and hopefully we'll be able to do similar things with this next project if you get, positive results in May here in a couple weeks.
Jason, can I just stop you right here? One thing
Yep.
just to note for the board, this is one of the values of this service. They can look out for things that we wouldn't normally be in the weeds, and they make a recommendation to Stephanie, who therefore makes a recommendation to the board about, hey, if you invest here, or hey, if you go through this service, you can garner more funds. And that's really incredibly helpful. So we pay for this service, but this is one of the value addeds. Thank you.
Yep. So then rolling forward, just taking an overall look at kind of where your, capital side of your budget looks. If you look on the left-hand side of the page here, and where the blue shading is, that's all your existing capital projects. So all of your debt service for prior bonds, including that authorization we just looked at, as well as the building aid, and then focusing in on column D towards the middle of the page there where the blue shading is, that's your local share. So essentially the piece of the tax levy that's used to pick up anything left over after the building aid to pay for your capital projects. So one key part of that, and we'll see this kind of throughout the presentations, it's very important to manage that local share where we can, because that's a big piece of the tax cap calculation. So where the discussions with the upcoming project votes started is you see that local share dropping from 196,000 to 12,000 from 26 to 27. So that was an ideal time to bring a project on. So that's how we kind of started those discussions in terms of, planning for a vote this May. Ultimately, as you went through your needs and your scope, the project was of a greater size than what fits into that drop off, but we're still able to utilize that drop off to at least offset some of the local share costs. So when you look at that far right hand column in the combined local share, even though the upcoming $25 million vote has a local share of about $540,000 a year, when you look at that far right hand column, the increase from what you're currently paying is only about $359,000. So we can minimize that cost to the homeowners that we've been mentioning in your publications and your meetings in terms of what this project's going to cost. So by kind of lining that up and utilizing that retiring debt from some of your older projects, you at least get some benefit, even if there is still an anticipated tax increase for the upcoming vote. Okay. And we'll kind of circle back on the thought of the vote towards the end of the presentation, in terms of the tax cap impacts as well. But so then jumping forward, and again, this is just a kind of a graphical picture of that discussion. So again, this black line going across the page is kind of your current budget level. Everything that stays under that line, we can say is kind of just picked up from that retiring debt, and then those tax impacts that you've been letting the public know about is really just quantifying this increase from the current budget level.
Does anybody have any questions on those two slides?
Okay. So if no questions, then now we'll kind of start getting into actually looking at the long range plan side of things, more so than just the capital. So we always like to start by looking at kind of a 3-year look back of what have your operating results looked like the last few years. And that's to kind of see, are there any worrying trends that have already, borne out in prior years. The main thing to focus on here towards the bottom of the page, just above the dash line, that's your total general fund balance. So, all the categories are broken out above, but as you look at that bottom line number, what you'll see is that's been going up the last couple of years, which is, good news. That's, the direction you'd like to see things going. And obviously, as we've already discussed, the stimulus funding helped with that a lot. That was an extra revenue. That was a real boon for school districts. But the district has done a good job of making sure those funds were utilized, and you've been able to, build up a little fund balance that will then help you as you try to retain some of those positions or weather the storm of, less state aid than anticipated. You've been able to at least build yourself a little bit of breathing room by kind of working through that stimulus funding in a financially prudent way. So that's a good kind of look back. And then as we roll forward, now we start looking at the future projections. So we're going to look at revenues overall in a minute, but we do start with state aid. We break out because as you can see, there are so many categories that go into that. So what you see here is you have your actual aid for 22-23 and 23-24. The 24-25 column is updated as of yesterday morning to include the enacted state budget that came out over the weekend. And then for 25-26 and beyond, we have some projections built in there. So really the couple key areas to focus on this page, the foundation at the top line, that's obviously been all over the news. I'm sure you discussed that as part of your budgeting process. The aid was restored as part of the enacted budget, so you're not seeing the reduction of the hold harmless. Prior to this update, that foundation aid was about 120,000 lower. So that's good news, and that certainly helps. And going forward, we're projecting 1% increases, but that is one variable that could change as we move forward over the next couple of years here, as there was information in the budget about possibly some kind of institute or task force to reevaluate foundation aid and see where that goes in the future. So that will definitely be a key variable to keep an eye on as we do updates over the next couple of years. Universal pre-kindergarten, just to point out real quick there, you see there's no aid in those lines. We're just pulling that out. You do receive aid in your state aid runs, but that really immediately goes over to your special aid or your special aid fund. And we're really just focusing on general fund projections here. So we've taken those out just to not confuse the numbers, because they really kind of are received in the general fund, but then immediately taken back out to that other fund. Other than that, we're keeping most of the other revenues fairly similar because they're expense driven. So as long as we're continuing to maintain similar programs, we expect similar aid back in terms of BOCES, excess cost aids, hardware, software, things like that. Transportation, we are projecting a 1% increase in that as well. Just knowing that some of those costs are going up, so we might receive more aid as a result of that. And then the only ones that aren't coming directly from the state aid runs are the building aid and capital outlay projections. Those are all pulling from what we went through on the first two slides of the presentation, because we know what's anticipated in terms of future projects, outlays, things like that from our discussions with the district. So we are projecting based on the financial plan we've laid out with Stephanie and the district on those lines, and those just pull directly from the projections that we work with you on.
So what's captured in 26 to 27 for the building aid? Sorry.
Yep, from 26 to 27, that would be, you see that $1.8 million increase. If I go back here real quick, that's in column F, that's the first year of the aid on the proposed $25 million project. So I guess that's one thing I didn't say while looking at this slide, is we are assuming for the purposes of this long range plan update that the project vote in May will pass and will come forward, because we've put that out to the voters. Obviously, if it were not to pass, then that would change these projections a little bit. But that's what that increase on the state aid page is the start of the building aid flow on the proposed new project.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions on those aid categories? And again, just to clarify, that capital outlay, that's that $100,000 project that we do all the time, and we get 78% back. So if you look, you'll see there's $78,400 back every year. So one of the considerations as we look to future budgets, anytime you cut a BOCES aidable service or something like that, you actually lose aid. So you might save money that first year, but you lose it as a revenue the next year. So that's always a balance that we have to keep in mind. Yeah.
Okay, all set on the state aid?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so then moving to the next page, now we kind of look at the overall picture and revenues. A number of line items here, but really the main ones to focus on are the taxes and the state aid. So we've already covered the state aid on the previous page. That one just pulls from there. And then the taxes, so real property taxes and STAR, the top two lines, what we're assuming going forward is essentially going out right at your cap. So your 24-25, you've already built, based on the budget that you're putting forward at around 3.5%. 25-26, we're anticipating you will have potentially another fairly significant allowable increase of 4.2%. And part of that is that new project, if it's to pass, starting to roll on in terms of the debt service and the capital exclusion. And then after that, once that project kind of gets baked in 26, then you get back to kind of the more traditional numbers that would assume around a high 2% allowable tax levy increase. So those are the assumptions we've made so far for tax increases in this scenario. Other than that, most of the other revenues we're assuming are going at roughly similar levels to what they've been doing. The only one that's kind of significantly different is use of money and property. We've conservatively estimated only 100,000. This current year, you're anticipated to wind up closer to 440,000 or so, and that's really your interest earnings. So this year, Steffi and the business office has done a good job of making your money work for you and really getting some good interest earnings and that extra revenue. But we just don't know where rates will be. It wasn't that long ago. It was only 0.25% you could make in the bank. So that is one area where we could see some improvement if interest earnings on your bank accounts continue to stay high, and the district continues to do a good job of investing your money and making it work for you.
So I'll just point out one thing that actually Jason said a couple times when he presented to the board. If we don't ever go out of the tax cap, whatever that limit is, you actually leave money on the table because your budget will always grow from that. So if, for example, we went out at 2% now, that you aren't building the budget from 3.5 next year, you're building it from 2. So that's just something to keep in mind as you go forward, because that's such a big component of our budget is that tax piece.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you see that the tax base and the state aid is essentially, 90+% of your budget, and you don't really control the state aid. So the taxes is the one big piece that you can really control and kind of, direct the revenue side of your budget. One other thing to point out on the bottom right-hand corner of this page, you see the average increase in the revenue is about 3.4%. So if you just keep that in mind as we start to look at, expenditures, that'll be an important figure as well. So then jumping to the expenditure page, so this is a very high level look at your expenditures. Obviously, you have much more detailed budgets, much more detailed books that roll into these numbers. But we try to at least keep it at a high level for these purposes of looking at a long range plan. So essentially, on the top half of the page, you see kind of some of your main expense categories in terms of operations. You have your general support, instruction, and transportation, all broken out by salaries compared to more just kind of general administrative costs. And in transportation, you also have your bus purchases in there as well. You can see on the left-hand side what we're assuming for projected increases on any of those given categories. And one thing to note in 24-25, we are assuming some increases from the prior year from some positions that were previously being paid for out of the federal stimulus funds, and we are now pulling back into the general fund in terms of expenditures instead of being in that special aid fund. So that's why you see some larger increases in 24-25 in that regard. And then down on the bottom half of the page, you got your employee benefits, broken out by a few categories. Retirement and Social Security, we kind of know what those percentages are, and they just run out based off of the salaries you're projecting. And then hospital medical dental is the other big employee benefit, and we're projecting 12% increases on that. Which seems like a lot, but we all know that health insurance isn't cheap and it's not getting cheaper. So that's in there. And then on the bottom of the page, your transfers to your debt service fund, those all incorporate your existing debt as well as the anticipated new debt from the capital project in May if it were to pass. Just two things to point out on this page that I didn't already cover. The transportation, the bus purchases, we have not assumed anything for electric buses yet. We all know that mandate is out there and could be coming down the line, but there's still a lot more questions than answers, I think. So we haven't incorporated the assumption of electric buses in here yet. So that could cause more increases on the expenditure side if that does roll out as currently laid out in state law. And the other thing, if you look in the year-end estimated column, you see this 2.4 million transfer to capital. That's the capital reserve that the district is planning to use for the project if it passes in May. So if the vote does pass in May, then really you're supposed to move that money out of the capital reserve into the capital fund. So it would be an expenditure in this current year that is going to bump up your 24 expenses a little bit if the project does move forward. And then when we look in the bottom right-hand corner here, you see those expenses are going up 4.86%. So, a little bit higher than that revenue increase, which we'll see on the next page when we talk about fund balances. what that means and how that plays out for you. But obviously, that's a very common theme for school districts in New York State. Your expenses are not going down. It's not cheap to hire lots of, people in terms of salary increases to remain competitive and the cost of insurance, compared to the relatively limited resources you have on the revenue side for raise revenues. So that gap is a, fairly common problem that a lot of school districts are grappling with. Any questions on either the revenue or expenditure page? Anything we went over there?
It's a relatively small number. But what's the story with the workers' comp? It goes from 43 in 24, 25 to 85 and 26 after.
Yeah, we just had a decrease.
a
in
dynamo
workers' comp,
year. But,
It wasn't
So
so
it's conservative.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we can't, it would be irresponsible if we budgeted like this again, because I
Yeah,
don't
you
think
said
we're gonna
that,
have that
for
positive
sure.
year again.
Got
So
it.
we're trying to split the difference.
Right. 24 and 25, we kind of know where we're at and what we're budgeting for, but they're not in line with the historical trends of what we've seen. So that's why we bumped it back up a little. Okay. So then flipping forward to the fund balance page. So really what you're seeing here on the top half of the page is revenues and expenditures. So what does each individual year look like in terms of surplus or deficit? And then the bottom of the page, again, is just pulling from those actuals we looked at. It shows you the different categories of fund balance and what the overall fund balance does as you have the results of each of those years. So a couple things to notice here, in 24, it looks like you're in the red. Again, that is because of the use of that capital reserve. If you weren't moving the capital reserve over, if the project were to pass, then, the balance there is about 500,000 to 600,000. So that's kind of your true operating surplus for 24 is expected to be, 500,000 or 600,000. So a little bit, less so than 23, but certainly still a, good strong year. But then when we start to look at the out years, the future projections, you see those red numbers, and that's because as our surplus comes down a little bit and the budget gets tighter and those expenditures continue to grow at an outpaced size compared to the revenues, we start to get bigger and bigger gaps each year if we don't either, consider some of the things we can do for cost savings and or go out at tax caps, beyond what is allowed within the tax cap formula. So, the big picture here is when you look at the bottom line, you're positive still for a few years, and then you start to dip into the red as you get out into the last 2 or 3 years. So kind of the way I always present this, this isn't an uncommon, it's certainly an eye-opening picture, but it's not an uncommon picture for New York State school districts. So the big thing here to really take away is you just need to be aware and kind of have this in the back of your mind as you're making decisions. We'll talk a little bit at the end about, how do you manage this and what are some of the tools you can use. So you just have to think about some of those things in terms of, filling vacancies, cost savings from shared services, some of those things, to try to make sure that, this cliff doesn't happen as it is on the paper here. And we've kind of gone through some of the things that could go worse or better for you. Maybe interest earnings turn out better. Maybe the foundation aid formula does increase a little bit more in future years. So, there's certainly still some room, but it's always good to be aware a few years ahead of time so you can kind of make small adjustments as you head towards those future years rather than waiting until the last minute when you're, right up against that cliff and have to make the hard decisions, all at once in 1 year. Any questions on this page?
But I think it's a great reminder, anything that we put in the budget, even though you might say it's a one-time thing, it's just one time. Once it's in the budget, people have an expectation that it will remain. So you can see how adding things over time can build that budget. And what that's going to do is that's just going to raise that total expenses line, which is going to dig into your overall picture. So even though we're getting ready to pass this budget, we need to be starting to look as we go forward. So we're always in cost saving mode, but Jason is accurate. Many districts are in this spot unless you have profound like industry malls, Walmarts, Targets in your backyard. You're kind of living off this revenue source.
Okay. So then just the last 2 pages of the report, this next page is the tax cap. You know, we don't have to go through this in detail, but, you know, essentially what we're showing is just kind of the projections of where the tax cap's gonna go. And the key part is, you know, this is the tax cap that's actually feeding into the projections. And you can see going across the middle of the page there in that boxed in row, the long range plan as it's currently set up would not require you to go over the cap at all. So even though you're going at, you know, people always call it a 2% cap, it's really not a 2% cap. You can see, you know, your numbers are different every year and they're north of 2% every year. So, but the key part is these assumptions that we're using for the long range plan fit within the projected cap, and therefore you would not need any overrides. And to Angelina's point earlier, down in the bottom in the red row there, we are going right to the cap, so we're not leaving any of that money on the table in this long range plan. On the final slide, what we did real quick was we ran an analysis of what does the long range plan look like versus what would it look like if you went at a flat 2% every single year for the tax increase, regardless of what the cap allowed. So the top half of this page is what we're showing in the long range plan. Again, you see going out right at the cap, zeros across the board, nothing left on the table. On the bottom part, you see when you look at, you know, any given year, you would see maybe like a $200,000 number left on the table. But the problem is that starts to compound because you have a lower starting point for the next year. So as you add it up over the course of this 5-year projection, if you went at 2% instead of the maximum allowable cap, you'd be leaving about $3.2 million on the table, which is very important and intuitive when you start to look at this fund balance page again, because now instead of 8.4 million that you're in the red at the end of the 5 years, you could potentially be, you know, north of 11.5 million in the red if you're not maximizing that allowable cap number, and maybe that, you know, red even starts to creep up another year and you start to hit those harder discussions in the next budget cycle instead of out in 27 and 28. So that's just a useful tool, we think, to kind of show the impacts. You know, it doesn't sound like a big difference going at 2% instead of 3.5. When you're talking percentages, it seems like a small number, but when you actually run it out at the size of your levy, you know, it's millions of dollars that you're leaving on the table over a 5-year period if you're not, you know, maximizing what's allowed by the state.
Jason, I have one question. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Every once in a while, we get asked to consider an exemption, veterans exemption, firefighters exemption. There might be more in the future. Does this impact any of that? If the board were to adopt any of those exemptions, how does that change this financial picture?
It really shouldn't, I believe, because what it essentially does is it just shifts the tax burden within the district, right? So you're granting certain members of the community an exemption, but you're still setting your levy at whatever your levy is. So if you have the same levy but less assessed value to spread that across, then the people who, you know, who have an assessment of, you know, $300,000 for their home are going to be paying a little bit more because you're spreading the same amount of money over a smaller tax base. If that makes sense.
No, it does. I just wanted to make sure that I was correct in that assumption.
Yep. Yeah, and it's kind of like another way to think of it is, I mean, with star exemptions, right? You know, you have a regular star or a senior star, same thing. Like as somebody graduates in the senior star, they get a little bit of a tax break, but that means that everybody else is picking up a little bit more who's not having that same break. So, but in terms of the long range plan, it wouldn't really affect, you know, if you're still doing the same things with your levy, it wouldn't affect the bottom line as far as what we're looking at with fund balance projections, you know, allowable caps, anything like that.
So I know this is a lot to digest, but a couple things I just want to note. One, this resides under the financial reports on this board agenda, so it's open to the public. We'll have it and then can use it, and then certainly as the tax. Hopefully the project passes, we can, you know, build upon this for the future. But Jason has been wonderful to both Stephanie and ourselves to offer to come to any board retreat, answer any simple questions. So, you know, as we process this and as we go to our next steps, he's willing to come back and at any point and work with the board. But I do think this is really helpful to not just looking at every year as just a single snapshot, just looking at this and then how those decisions, whether it's adding a teacher or putting mats on the walls, wherever that might be, how that might impact our overall bottom line. Yeah, and it's, I mean, I think it's great to show everybody that we're being we're thinking about the future. We're not making willy-nilly decisions. We're really trying to make sure that we stay afloat over time. And Jason's been wonderful to work with. We did have a different group before, but I understand it the way he puts it forward. So I really appreciate working with you, Jason.
Yes.
Thank you, we
Thanks so
appreciate
much,
that.
Jason.
Anybody have any questions? Anybody in the audience? Any questions?
And if any questions come up, I can always reach out to Jason or.
Perfect. Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much and good luck with the budget vote and the project in a couple weeks.
Thanks.
You vote for Brunswick?
I do not, I live in Rochester, so,
Okay. Good. Talk to you later, Jason. Thanks.
yep, have a good one.
All right. I have a couple more things, but how can I get your presentation up on the screen?
Do you want me to email it to you?
Yes. That might help.
And I can email it you from my personal account, right?
Yeah. Okay, just a couple things. Part of my presentation, Celia's gonna be making a presentation to the board as part of my superintendent update, but I just wanted to give you a few things. Last time we met, which seems like it was just about a week ago, one of the students had asked a question about traffic, and it really begged me to look at some things. I actually drove up and down, and I had some really good conversations with the Department of Transportation. I do want to thank our district president, Nick Rose. He was able to put me in touch with the right people so that I could talk to the right people. And I actually, right before I came to this meeting, I got a form that basically says they're going to do a study outside of school. And basically what that's going to do, it's going to be an engineered study. It will not probably be anytime soon. They told me that their state workers get to it as soon as possible, which I thought was funny. But I would anticipate it being about 90 to 120 days, and they'll do a study out front. And what they'll do is they'll decide if it's prudent to lower the speed limit. Right now, the speed limit is 35. He did acknowledge with me that there's potentially a missing sign, but there's also no regulation for a sign. So we actually own, which I think I knew, those signs that have the flashing light, that actually isn't a speed sign, but that's to indicate the crosswalk. What I shared with him was that one of my main concerns is the real heavy equipment and the trucks that come flying downhill and go flying and really wouldn't have time to react. So that's one of my big concerns. He was wonderful. He was able to pull up our school on a satellite and look through some things. So as soon as they do the study, I'll get a formal written report, and then they'll tell us how they'll take action. But just like anything else, I can't call a town and say, hey, can you put up a sign that's owned by DOT? So it was a really great conversation. It was nice to speak to someone who would listen and just kind of go through things. What? Why is the crosswalk there? So you guys put it there, just kind of talking through the so he's like, do the kids get dropped off on Route 2? I said, oh God, no. But the kids do cross the street, and so do some of our adults when they park across the street. So that was one of my very main concerns. And also, as traffic builds up, if something comes down, they get hit by a car from behind. So that was really great.
We get on the other side of the crosswalk something, 'cause I don't think it goes into a sidewalk. I think it goes into the grass, right? Not the one near the soccer field, but the next one up.
The gas station.
Yeah,
Like on our side,
no.
on
the
their
other
side. Hi.
I'm surprised that it just empties out.
Yeah, I don't know the history of that. I can ask them. I have the contact of the
Yeah.
guy. I just remember going through before. They're very funny about because we asked for a light. They said no. We asked for a different crosswalk pattern. They said no. Somebody wanted a bridge one time. That was definitely a no. But they have to do some risk mitigation to figure out if anything that they add to it is going to cause more of a problem. So it was very, very interesting. I just said to them, which you brought up at the last meeting, we're one of the few schools that I can think of now that actually doesn't have the caution school zone.
Yeah.
And it was just very interesting, but I think it's because it's a state road, and a lot of schools aren't necessarily right on that state road. But there are some, and they have it. So just interesting. Kevin McCormick, our O&M guru, has shared with me that he heard through his O&M network that several districts are using field specialists, different than the field specialists that we've had before, but just to come in and look at the fields. And even if this capital project passes, there's still going to be some time where we have standing water out there. And as you probably have seen, not only our district, but many districts have had to cancel a lot of things. The water table is just very, very high. So he actually has somebody coming over tomorrow just to take an eyeball at it to see if there's anything additional we should do now to make it better, for the future. And he has the report that the architects had previously done to give to the field specialist. So I thought I would share that with you. You probably have heard Mrs. Honorado speak at length about a potential ELA adoption. And I sent an email to the board earlier today that the Curriculum and Assessment Council has reviewed the ELA program review team's recommendation to adopt a curricular series K through 5. And although the program we now know is Wonders, that's the recommendation. It was really, and Kelly can speak to it a little bit more, unanimously selected by a committee of teachers, reading specialists, special educators, all different grades to really make sure that our district has the best program. And as Kelly and I were talking today, this is a lot of money. There's no question about it. But this is what we're here for. We're here to teach kids how to read. So if we're going to invest in something, it ought to be a really good program. And I feel very confident in the selection. I think it's a great program. I have put on the agenda not only the adoption of this, which we'll need to actually move it forward and purchase it, but the PowerPoint presentation, not only for the board, but for any of the public that is interested in the ed ratings and what it consists of. It is based on the science of reading, which is now the buzzword. That's not why it was selected, but it does fit into the fact that we do want to make sure we're using the latest, greatest research in our instructional practices for kids. Do you want to add anything to it, Wally?
I mean, that kind of covers, I think, the high points, and as Angelina said, it's something that, you know, I've kind of been updating bit by bit as the year is going on. So it's a really labor intensive but very thoughtful process on the part of our instructional review team for ELA. I've been really connected with them as they've been doing this work, and the feeling across the building is excitement. I think people are excited, which says something in the face of a big change.
So on a positive note, once the board accepts our recommendation tonight, Kelly will work with Stephanie in terms of securing that purchase. So our goal is to put the materials in the teachers' hands before they leave this year. And then we can schedule some training, hopefully one before the end of this year and then one in October once they've actually dug into it, to make sure that we're really implementing it with confidence and fidelity. Because if we do that right, I feel pretty confident that our
Since this is gonna be a change, what is the onboarding process? Like, are they gonna come on site to teach, like, that's
Or
all
virtual, be
included?
virtual, but
Okay.
live.
Okay,
An actual person.
and that's
can answer
included in the
questions.
purchase?
Yeah, there's two training sessions. We can always purchase more, and sometimes, and I haven't checked yet, but sometimes Questar also can send specialists to us that actually have an expertise in this too. So we want to make sure that there's long-term sustained planning. We are making a 6-year commitment to this, which I feel pretty good about, because we're not, oh, this year we're gonna do this next year we're gonna do this. That people know, hey, for the next 6 years, this is what we're gonna be doing, and hopefully it'll give you appropriate products and continue on using it. But just like everything else, there's always changes, there's updates to these things, research standards change sometimes. And that's part of the reason why we needed to make the change. But as Kelly mentioned before, the previous product sunsetted as well. So also this week we've had some challenging information up at our bus garage. Some people would be surprised to know, but we actually have fuel tank and we actually have diesel and gas for our buses. And actually some of our neighbors actually use our bus from DOT, and some of the volunteer rescue squads use our facility. This week we discovered that there was liquid in places there shouldn't be liquid, and being very cautious, we called our Questar Health and Safety, and we contacted DEC and reported a potential spill. Stephanie was astute enough to actually get insurance for this, which is absolutely wonderful because I didn't think we had it. Some insurances don't cover spill mitigation, but this isn't actually spill mitigation. This is actually part of the tank. So we don't actually 100% know if it's leaking or what it's leaking. We know something's not working right, but we do have insurance for it. We are working with DEC and an engineer and helping with getting all the liquid out so we can investigate the spot. So right now, we don't believe there's an environmental impact. We think it's contained all within the secondary containment, which is what it's supposed to be. But again, just something to keep on your long-term radar. This fuel tank is probably somewhere between 20 and 30 years old, and we'll have to make a decision as a district. One, what do we do with it? And two, do we continue to use it? And it's easy to say, no, we'll just go to Stewart's, but the one thing that we do get is a lot of cost savings by having our own gas, as opposed to going through a third party and that kind of thing. So right now we do have a secondary plan. Stephanie was able to make arrangements. We have like a credit card. There's a rotation where they're going to a different fuel site to get some things. But they're working very methodically. But I felt very heartened with the way the TDC officer, he wasn't looking well alarmed. He was really pleased that we had a health and safety specialist there and that there's an engineer on site, that we weren't just trying to, oh, what do we do? I have a feeling, could be wrong in this, I have a feeling that they're probably going to have to dig them up to do a visual inspection of pipes, but that's what insurance is for. But it shouldn't interrupt our operations at all. The buses actually can go around and get home. So it'll be okay. So I did want to give you an update on that. And then
She did answer this too email to you.
okay, I'll get back to her. Oh, now I see it. I'll get back to her. Let me transition over to our administrators. Kelly, do you want to go first while I work on this?
Sure. I feel like it hasn't been that long ago since
No.
we last met,
No.
so I'll be brief. Tomorrow's our, that's right.
This is out. Okay. Karaoke time. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Tomorrow's our first of our 2 grandparents and special friends, special guest days, so pray for good weather. We will also be continuing state testing season with our science tests for 5th graders this week. That's just one day and all computer-based because it's 5th grade that will be participating. And we'll be having our 3rd marking period pause party to celebrate all of our student pause awardees. This marking period we focused on the W working together. So those students will have a special treat at the end of the week.
Great. Thank you so much. You want to pass that on, please?
Good evening. Not much of an update either. We're still plowing through our annual reviews. We are coming to a close in a few weeks. So by May 1st, our ESY recommendations, extended school year, summer school recommendations for out of school district students will be submitted. And beyond that, I just want to say I'm very, very grateful that we landed with an SLP candidate. Just to reiterate how difficult it was, I think we went through about 6 reposts for the SLP position. It's been challenging for the current SLPs to, divide things and conquer. And even though I specified that there were only 10 students impacted, who will need to have some of those sessions made up after our new Mr. Durant comes on board. What that means is not that there's an additional 10 students that we're not servicing, but that our current SLPs have been dividing our 78 students in our SLP caseload. So it's been quite large if you only take away 10 students from that 78 caseload, and the average is pretty large for one SLP to manage. So I just thank them for all of their flexibility this year as we went through this search, because there's not a lot out there. And, we had a lot of fellowships, a lot of SLPs right out of college, and we just felt as though it was important to keep looking, even though we needed it before the end of the year. So I appreciate our SLP's patience with it for that service.
Good evening. So for the secondary school, we completed try that again. We completed our New York State ELA testing. We are tomorrow and Thursday going into math testing, computer-based for the middle school, 6 through 8. Master scheduling, we are full board into that right now based on recommendations from the board. Redoing the high school schedule, also some middle school changes as well that we're in the works on with the full schedule committee. We have to get teacher schedules out by end of May, so there's a timeline for that. We're also in the process of hiring a new math teacher. Dr. Maloney and I met with the finalist today. We're very excited about. Hope to have her hopefully the
We
next
almost have a
board meeting.
full rainbow, Mr.
Yeah. And also I want to mention our academic eligibility policy. We have to call out for members for that committee, and we're going to be working towards that towards the end of the school year in terms of probably into the summertime as well. And I hope to have recommendation for some updates to that potentially over the summertime for the board as well. And hopefully some more updates, I guess, on May 9th. We'll meet again. So, thank you.
Next, I just would like to ask Stephanie to quickly explain the two documents that you have in front of you. And I do want to note they look very, very
They
similar.
do, but they're a little different. So in front of everyone have one? Okay. So these two documents are basically, what it is all the school districts in the above counties, so Albany, Rensselaer, Montgomery, Schenectady, Washington, Warren, Columbia, Green, Saratoga, Fulton, and Schoharie. So basically all the districts in the broader capital district, more or less. And it looks at their fund balances over the last 5 years. The one document gives a fund balance, per student, and the other one gives a fund balance as a percent of budget for all these school districts. So you'll see that there are 82 districts on this. And you'll see that fund balance as percent of budget, we fall 33rd lowest out of 82. So we're obviously on the low end of that. And then when we look at fund balance per student, we are actually even lower. We are 23 out of 82. And this doesn't take into consideration also that we're about to use almost $2.5 million of our fund balance in our capital project to offset that tax impact. So I just thought this was something good to look at, compare us to districts in the area. Really interesting. You can kind of see, big districts, small districts, suburban council, districts in our area, our neighbors, and where they lie compared to us. But I think this shows that we don't have an exorbitant amount of fund balance, but we have a healthy amount of fund balance. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Is this where you said there was a recommendation as far as like what that percentage should be?
Not on this.
Are you talking about the 4%?
The 4%.
Oh, that's different. Yeah. That's only for the unassigned. This is total fund balance.
Got it.
Yeah, this would be total. So the unassigned, it also includes the reserves in there. This is total fund balance, all pieces, not just the unassigned fund balance.
Just out of curiosity, how does a district like Albany go from 22 million in 2019 to 72 million in 23?
I think the COVID funds, yeah. They received massive amount. The poor districts receive
Poor
more.
districts
Yeah.
are swimming in
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Quote from
Yeah,
one of
it's
our
very
neighbors,
But
"We
that's
don't know
pulled
what
out,
to do
right?
with it." What do you mean by?
Not in this.
They're not getting it.
Go for
Oh,
it. No,
yeah,
same
yeah,
as
yeah,
us.
same as us, yeah.
But because they got so much, they're able
They
to
were
use
able to
it for more
pack
of
it
a
in.
longer time.
Got it.
Because they had so much. Some of them had so much in because the categories were so narrow, they didn't even know what to do with it all, which is crazy.
Yeah,
It's
so
true,
some-
though.
some of these you can really see that jump with the COVID
Yeah,
funds.
it's crazy.
Any questions on this? Oh, yeah, lots of questions. Alright.
Can you use the, for look?
Is there a mouse there?
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's why I had to be.
Wow. What are you just?
Yeah,
Actually, carbon. Do you want to?
they got massive amounts of COVID funds.
No, actually, because then I don't want to look at it. Okay, this is Miss Zelia Pantha, who you may have seen when she was an 8th grader. She made a presentation that was in the newspaper. She did some work as she worked towards some of her Girl Scout endeavors. And now she's getting at the pinnacle, and I apologize, I'm not familiar with all the terms, but this is almost like the equivalent of an Eagle Scout,
Yes,
which
it
people are
is.
more familiar with. So,
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay.
no, we're gonna make you use this.
Oh, okay, even better.
I don't have to like yell for once. Okay, so right now I'm actually going for my Girl Scout Gold Award, which is the highest award a Girl Scout can receive. It is throughout the 9th grade year to your 12th grade year of high school, and then once you finish this project, you are officially done with Girl Scouts. a little bit of background about me. I'm 16. I do go to Tamarack High School. I have been in Girl Scouts for about 10 years. It's been a while. I've gotten my bronze award and my silver award. For my bronze award, I went to the Ronald McDonald House, and basically we made some welcome kits for the families that had to stay there with their kids or any like spouses that had to be in the hospital and they just couldn't get back and forth to their homes. So the Ronald McDonald House was right stationed by Albany Med. So we made some welcome kits for them to make them feel a little bit more at home and a little bit more welcomed. For my silver award, I made benches for the elementary school. I got my silver award during COVID. So basically, I went to Dr. Maloney and I was like, "Hey, you guys need anything? Because I need something. So I help you out, you help me out." So I made benches for the kids to kind of just get outside, get into the environment again, just start reading, like most of them right out there. Yeah. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. For the past year, I've been working on my application to start my project. I just recently got the receival of my approval on 11/27/2023. For my gold award, I will be making monarch butterfly gardens. I'm hoping to put 2 gardens in Dyken Pond, and then I'm actually hoping to put 1 here. I'm doing this project mostly because a lot of butterflies, including monarch butterflies, are on the endangered list. I'm kind of just trying to help them come back into the ecosystem. For the I didn't know I was that loud. For my plan, I hope to make garden pots out of the wooden pallets that like Home Depot and like Lowe's use to like lift heavy things. Then I do need some milkweed. I'm hoping to get that from Lowe's or like Home Depot. Hopefully they'll just donate it to me so I don't have to like buy it. Yeah, that's basically. Oh, thank you. You're on that. To receive my gold award, I need at least 80+ hours of volunteer work and working on the project. It has to be done as an individual, so that means no one else in my troop can help me with it or like join me and receive my gold award as their gold award. My project has to benefit my community in some way, and it has to stay in the community untouched for about 5 years. For the butterfly life cycle, to kind of wrap around why it's so important is because they are on the endangered list. They've been on the endangered list for a couple of years now. They really need this during their migration periods because a lot of them, when they're flying up north, they start reproducing and planting their eggs, and they need milkweed to do that. Milkweed is a very scarce kind of plant that is not easy for them to find. So having them have safety with the milkweed, even just from predators, because birds like to eat them for nutrition, and just giving them like a place to like rest and re-energize themselves. These, as monarch butterflies, they are very important to our ecosystem. They help pollinate and bring out flowers. They are a food source. Again, they're a food source to birds, and losing a pollinator and a food source disrupts our ecosystem. Okay, today, what I am asking for is to put 1 here at Tamarack. I would like to put a monarch butterfly garden. It is a 3x3 kind of garden. It's nothing big. Basically, Tamarack will not have to touch the garden, would not have to help plant the garden, nothing. You just have to literally watch the butterflies come in and out. That is it. Yeah. Any questions?
Do you know if milkweed naturally grows on our property somewhere? Or
I
would that
do
be
not.
something that you can?
I can plant it. I also can look for it too. If that, I know Jody Lacopola, she's my advisor for my project. She has milkweed in her backyard. So I might also take some of that.
So I may have missed this, but where is the courtyard gonna put it, or where are you planning on placing it?
Honestly, wherever you guys tell me to place it.
Yeah, well, probably. The answer for me would be yes, and what we'll do is we'll work with you, Mrs. Locola, to find a place that won't somehow get mowed down.
Right.
That is somewhat protected, but that they would have access
Yeah.
to. And having the courtyards would potentially be a really good spot.
Okay. Yeah.
So was this just your own personal interest? It could have been, it could have done anything?
Yes, yeah. So really as the Girl Scout community goes, when you want to apply, your troop leader, she comes and she gives you a pamphlet. She says, all right, these are what other girls have done the past years for the Gold Award. Actually, a girl a couple of years ago did something like this. It wasn't exactly like mine, but I chose to do this mostly because I actually saved the monarch butterfly because I don't know, I don't even know if it was a she or he. I called it a she. She had her wing ripped off from a bird, I believe. So I kind of like brought it in and like nurtured it back to health. And then you called what, the Monarch Butterfly Sanctuary?
I called the Pine Bush. The Albany Pine
Yeah, the
Bush for them to come and, like, if they could rescue it, and they said it would die within 3 days. So
That butterfly stayed with us for about a month.
So
I'm just really good at taking care of animals, guys. Like, it's my special thing. So yeah, that's kind of my interest in doing that. So.
Well, what I'd like to have happen is we'll work to make sure Mr. Rizzo is okay with the spot on
Yeah.
our grounds, and we'll have you come back and report to the board.
Okay, great.
Did you win? How'd you guys do?
I believe track won.
I run my race. I won the race in my race for track, and then for lacrosse we lost.
Well, that's
It happens.
1 out of 2 ain't bad.
Yeah, no, 1 out of 2 ain't bad at all.
Thank you.
Oh, you have it.
Oh. Sorry. All right, next up is Carly, my traveling buddy.
So since the last meeting, there hasn't been much going on, but sports are going good so far. We also had a senior meeting to discuss what the end of the school year would look like, which was very helpful and informative. There is a lot coming up at the end of the school year though, such as the NHS ceremony, which is on May 16th, prom, which is on May 18th, high school awards night, which is on June 4th, the Heads of Hope walk/run for brain cancer awareness, which will be on June 2nd. A ton of senior activities and just making sure the end of the school year stays in line is good so that we can all graduate.
Yes.
All right. So that brings us to committee and liaison updates. We just recently had anybody have it.
Oh, sure. So I think we discussed this at the last meeting, but PTSA was very helpful and invited us to make a presentation on the budget and the capital project at their last meeting. I would say we had a lot of good questions. Obviously, folks are excited about making some improvements, especially when we're talking about student safety, health, security, etc. So I think it went very well. And just as we said at that meeting, and as we said at the last board meeting, if folks have any questions about the budget or the capital project, or you're looking at the numbers and saying what gives, certainly raise them to the board, and we'll do our best to get answers to all of them.
That's fine. All right, so that brings us to the Quest Star election ballot and the administrative budget. So I think we can do those on consent. So motion to put 5.1, 5.2, Jenna, Danielle. Any discussion?
No, this is the reason that we're meeting on a Tuesday. It's required by state law for us to adopt the local BOCES budget Tuesday night.
All right, so all in favor? Motion carries. That brings us to special ed, 6.1, 6.2 on consent. Danielle, Tammy? All in favor? Motion carries. And that brings us to 7.1 through 7.5, the superintendent's personnel recommendations. Motion to put that on the table. Danielle, Brian? Any discussion?
I just want to note, 7.3 is Lacey that earlier in the meeting, and then item 7.5, she's hiding in the back there. Mrs. Bailey is coming back as our varsity soccer coach, which we're really excited about. It really is wonderful when we have an educator right within the system to coach. There's just some really good connections that are super helpful. So thank you for that, and we appreciate you taking the program.
All in favor? Motion carries. Brings us to business recommendations, 8.1 through 8.4. Motion to put that on the table. Ryan, Tammy? Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. And that brings us to 9.1, the adoption of Wonders ELA series. Talked about earlier. Leah? Ryan? All in favor? Motion carries. That brings us to public comment.
Daniel?
Go ahead, Daniel.
So,
You have the microphone?
Hello, my name is Daniel Vincent. I attend Tamarack High School. I'm a senior, and today I just wanted to make a comment about student density in some of our lunch periods. I've had personal talks with some of the aides and students, and along with myself, it's been apparent that this predominantly seventh period lunch is very, very densely populated. I myself have waited 10, 15, 20 minutes just to grab my lunch and go. And me personally, I have an alternating lunch. So I have period 6, and then sometimes I'll go 7th because I have another class. And I feel that those students who have 7th period lunch as their main standard lunch are at a disadvantage just because of the amount of time that they need to wait to get their food and go. Say they need to go to class or do some extra work. Compared to the other lunches where it's like 5, less than that, just to grab your lunch and go. I'm not aware if this is a scheduling issue. I'm not aware if this is just a behavioral issue among students, but I just wanted to bring it up.
And do you think that when the lunches went free, that it increased the number of kids getting lunch, which just made it a little bit busier?
I will say yes, definitely, but there it was still apparent before that, before the free lunches came in. But
thank you.
That's it? All right. So I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session for a personnel issue. Jenna, Danielle, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you all for coming.
Yep, just for your. Yep.
Angelina?
Yes.
And
Thank you.